Hey everybody, welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. We have Jake Tapper back with us again. We'll chat with Jake in just a moment, but first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. So, Jake Tapper wrote the New York Times bestselling nonfiction books The Outpost, an untold story of American valor, which was turned into a critically acclaimed film in 2020, and this year's original Sin, President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again. He's also written two New York Times bestselling novels, The Hellfire Club and The Devil May Dance. He is an Emmy Award-winning TV journalist as lead DC anchor and chief Washington correspondent for CNN. His new book, Race Against Terror, Chasing an Al-Qaeda Killer at the Dawn of the Forever War, comes out Tuesday, October 7th. Jake, welcome back into the back room.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Andy.
I know you're a big Eagles fan. Yesterday, fourth quarter.
I mean, look, the truth is that all four of the Eagles' victories this season have been not exactly blowouts. All of them have been close one way or another. And you know, they needed a come to Jesus moment or come to Moses moment, depending on their faith, I suppose. And you know, there's been some rusty stuff. And our passing game is not what it needs to be, and we got out coached in the last quarter without question. And you know, it is what it is. I mean, I will also note that I think the Eagles last season started out 2-2 before they went on to like be so dominant and win the Super Bowl. But yeah, I mean, like I don't know one Eagles fan going into the season saying we're definitely going to make it to the Super Bowl. I mean, we all have our eyes opened about what happened. Look, it's really tough to repeat.
Yeah, well, it could be worse. You could be a Jets fan.
You know, some of my best friends, like this is literally true. Some of my best friends are Jets fans and from college, and I mean, they right after college, when all of a sudden they had, you know, disposable income, they had like season tickets, and it's been a long, long path with these friends. I feel bad for them. Yes, it could always be worse. I'm not asking for, no, there's no Eagles fan asking for sympathy today.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a rough game.
And most Jet fans are also Mets fans. So not been a good couple of weeks.
No, but you know, I'm a Phillies fan also, and that was a rough game against the Dodgers, and like whoever, yeah, I mean, look, I was raised hating the Mets because you guys would come down to our stadium and you'd have more Met fans in Veterans Stadium than Phillies fans, and that was painful. So I don't really feel a tremendous amount of sympathy for Mets fans, but I hear you. Like, look, I mean, it's when your teams are firing, it's great, and for most people, they're not. Most people, their teams are not firing, and you know, anyway, so it was a bad weekend for Philadelphia sports fans.
Yeah, well, the good thing for me is the Knicks season starts in about a week.
Well, see, you have hope. You have hope there. Like,
and I could be disappointed yet again.
But I mean, but Sixers fans, we're all dealing with Joel Embiid's constant state of injury, and it's been. We were trying to figure out, me and my gym buddy the other day, just this morning. I mean, I bet we're trying to figure out how long have we been waiting for this process of Joel Embiid to kick in, and it's been a while because I saw him at the 2018 Super Bowl. So I mean, it's been a while that we've been waiting for him to be at his finest. So congrats ahead of time too. If you get at least you get a great team to root for, the Knicks. I mean, I know they didn't make it last time, but
there's always next year. That's our motto. So let me ask you about the shutdown. What are you hearing about? I mean, we're in day 6. Seems like nothing's going on except juvenile nonsense back and forth. What are you hearing, if anything, about when serious negotiations between the parties, between leadership, perhaps with Trump, may happen, and how long this thing is looking like it may last, or are both sides just so completely entrenched?
Right now, the latter. Right now, there is no incentive structure for either side to compromise in any way. I mean, like, you know, normal human beings might say, you know, can't we just find some sort of off-ramp for this? But the Republicans are saying, no, this is a clean bill, and this is what Democrats have railed at us for not supporting in the past, and they need to just sign this, and then we can negotiate on whatever else they want. Democrats are saying this is our only time that we have any leverage, and these Obamacare subsidies are about to run out, and it's going to impact Trump state voters more than blue state voters. We need to deal with this. And right now, I see zero incentive. I mean, other than wanting to solve the problem and end the government shutdown, there's zero political incentive for Democrats or Republicans to want to do the right thing. This incentive structure is an important thing for people to try to pay attention to in politics. What's the incentive structure for somebody to compromise? What's the incentive structure for somebody to work across the aisle with a Republican, with a Democrat to get something done? The longer I have covered politics, the more the incentive structure has been built for the opposite, for shutdowns, for not compromising, for demonizing. And I don't know when this shutdown will end. I really don't. And I don't, I mean, I guess, Republicans just need to pick off 8 Democrats in the Senate to end the shutdown, and they had 3, so they need 5 more. But I don't really sense a huge appetite. And in fact, I see Republican senators like Ted Cruz like putting the stupid sombrero in memes on Democrats that are moderates that they hope to pick up, and which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But what do I know? I'm not a senator.
You mentioned incentive. In conventional times, a shutdown would rock the economy, would rock the stock market, right? We're seeing just the opposite. I turn on CNBC every day and it's just nothing but green. It's as if we're not in a government shutdown. And that's very, very bizarre to me.
Well, we're only in day 6. First of all, we're only in day 6, right? And like a lot of federal employees get paid once a month, and others get paid twice a month. And so right now, nobody has missed a paycheck. As of right now, nobody has missed a paycheck. So it's easy to be breezy,
Well, there's
Now,
usually just like a punishing effect. It's just like the market doesn't like uncertainty. Wall Street doesn't like uncertainty. And then they usually punish politicians for this lack of ability to govern.
yeah, except in some, I mean, do you remember during the Obama years when I think it was S&P downgraded U.S. bonds
Right.
from, I think, AAA to AA or something like
Right.
that? And it was because that the United States can't govern itself and
Yeah.
cannot be counted upon to govern itself. And so I don't know how much of this is built in. Also, there is an argument that the stock market is completely disconnected from the way that
Reality.
yeah, that men and women, working men and women, are living their lives,
Yeah.
and so that's a different argument. But I think as of right now, it's just pretty early. Also, keep in mind that the stock market seems to be doing really well, even though there are a lot of businesses that are really suffering, especially small
Yeah.
businesses, from these tariffs. So again, I don't know what the disconnect is. We also don't have the Bureau of Labor Statistics data for the stock market to react to, because that's one
Hmm.
of the things not functioning along with this government shutdown. It does seem as though, based on other data, that hirings are slowing significantly. So yeah, but I can't attest to the explanation as to why there is no shock as of yet. I think people saw the shutdown coming. And yeah, I mean, I don't know, but again, it's really early. Like when I think the longest shutdown we'd had was in the first Trump term in 2018, 2019, I think is what it was, and that was over funding for the wall, and Democrats didn't want to fund the wall, and seems like such a quaint time in retrospect. But yeah, I mean, look, I think it's going to get worse. And that's my when people ask me about anything having to do with politics
Right.
today, it's going to
Right.
get worse.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, we're talking about the stock market, but if we also just look at everything else that's happening, troops on the streets, Trump defying court orders, you would think the stock market would be tanking given all this unprecedented uncertainty. So it's a mystery to me. I mean, I've been following the markets for years, and I've never seen such a disconnect like this.
But
I don't know what it means.
why would the markets react uh, ICE troops or federal troops in Chicago or Portland? Like why would that be disruptive? Just because it's chaos?
It's chaos connected to all the other chaos. It's
I
not like
don't,
anything in a vacuum. It's just the
but
compounding effect.
I don't think that kind of chaos impacts like supply chains though. I don't know that I mean it's like books being banned or discrimination happening. You know, like I don't think that that factors in. Like the stock market is not a value of
Mm.
life, or like how good, you know, is the country going in the right direction, or are we striving to be the better angels of ourselves meter. That's not what it, that's not what it records. You know, it's not
Well,
like
the stock market is
our
just nothing but sentiment,
right.
and the
Well,
business community and business people, small
and
business
they think
people.
that there's a pro-business guy in the White House, other than the tariffs, that does concern them. That's going to keep fighting for them for tax cuts and trying to create and continuing to deregulate, and that makes them generally happy, I think.
I don't know. I mean, I mean, arguing a very logical, rational point, but
I
to
think it's an
me,
amoral system. That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't
well,
think it judge. Like, I'm sure the stock market. I'd have to go back and look, and
well,
I'm sure
that's
that.
kind of my point, is that that disconnect seems so out of the realm of reality today on so many levels relating to economic fundamentals or corporate earnings or where the market looks out 6 months from now, to the chaos on the streets, to tariffs, to the potential for other disruptions to the economy and business community. I don't know. It just seems nuts to me, but we won't fix that here. But you did mention the fight over Obamacare subsidies. The Democrats also seem to be fighting for some kind of undoing of the huge Medicaid cuts that was in the big ugly bill.
Yeah,
Um,
they're trying to. Yes, they're trying to reverse a lot of the Medicaid
yeah,
cuts and or reductions in growth, whatever you want to call it, in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. They're
yeah,
trying to.
and Republicans are claiming that this to them is all about undocumented immigrants getting free health care. Which, can we
Yeah,
kind of put an end to that myth?
it's not like it's as with so many of these things, there might be a nugget of truth underneath it all, but like it is true that one of the things Democrats are fighting for is for the reimbursement for emergency Medicaid services to hospitals
Right.
be restored to the original baseline. And it is true that a lot of people who don't have health insurance use emergency rooms as hospitals, as their primary care physician. And a lot, not a lot, but a number of them are undocumented immigrants. So I mean, like it's in the realm of the neighborhood of based in fact, but it's not really an accurate argument. I mean, what they're trying to do is restore Medicaid funding to previous levels, and some of that might end up taking care of people who need health care who are not documented. That's true, but like obviously the overall argument is not what I would say completely in good faith. It's nor is the counter argument from Democrats when they say not one of these dollars is going to go to not blah blah. I mean, like that's not true either. I don't know why we can't just have adult conversations. If people
Really?
well, like I mean, it just look when Obamacare.
You're still hoping for that, are you?
Well, hope springs eternal.
Yeah.
The look when Democrats were trying to get Obamacare passed, one of the arguments they made that I accepted as the child of a doctor and a nurse was that if you have uninsured Americans, it's not that you're not paying for their health insurance. It's just that you are paying for the most expensive version of their health insurance, which is they hold off until they get very, very sick and then they go to an emergency room. And that's where it's the most expensive way to treat. And
Right.
so theoretically, it is smarter, more humane, and also cheaper to insure people. I mean, that is a argument. Um, and some of those people are undocumented immigrants. I mean, that's just a fact, and I don't know why we're pretending it's not true. It's very annoying. It's like being a parent and listening to your kids fight, and you're like, well, I mean, you're right a little bit on this, and you're right a little bit on that, but like, I saw what happened. Can we just, um, and I'm not trying to both sides this, but there is like the Republicans are not, by the way, the Republicans are not trying to change the law or the Supreme Court decision that made it that hospitals have to take care of people in the United States if they are seriously ill, regardless of their ability to pay. I mean, that's a law. Republicans are not seeking to undo that law. I mean, if they really don't want any dollars going to undocumented immigrants, you would have to change that law. You would have to, you know what I mean? I mean, like,
Mm-hmm.
they're not actually proposing that. So they're not
Mm-hmm.
actually trying, like, what they are fighting for with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act also provides Medicaid, emergency Medicaid for undocumented immigrants. I mean, they both do. They both the Democratic version and the Republican version, just Democrats want to fund it more. It's all just so dishonest. It's not really about what the shutdown's about. The shutdown is about uh, that Democrats are feel. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. One of them is the political incentive. Democratic voters want Democrats to fight, and two is these Obamacare subsidies that are set to expire and really do need to be dealt with. And Democrats don't feel like Republicans are actually going to support them in that effort. So that's what it's about. And Democrats are taking the risk, like, okay, we're going to shut down the government over this. That's what it's about.
It's well, like you said before, it's about leverage, which they really have almost none of,
None.
and are using this as an opportunity. But I just want to push back a little on the Democrats are shutting down the government thing because,
Well, they're not voting for a clean seal. I'm not a
well, but
I'm not saying they're
no, I
shutting down.
get that, but like
Yeah.
I could say like on behalf of Democrats, we vote for our politicians to go to Washington and vote our interests.
Right.
That
And fight for your interests.
fight
Right.
for your
And
interests, not fight for Trump's interests, not fight
right.
for Johnson's interests, not fight for Republicans' interests, fight for our interests. So
I think journalists need to say that Democrats are doing this, and they say they're doing it to fight for these Obamacare subsidies. And I think
they're doing their job, in
they're
my opinion.
opening. I'm not judging it one way or the other.
Whatever.
I mean,
Mhm.
like I've covered enough of these things that like, you know, this happens now. This is a regular matter of course in our incredibly
That's right.
dysfunctional system.
Hmm.
In this case, it is Democrats refusing to pass the clean continuing resolution to fund the government. And by the way, just for 7 more weeks. I'm not saying that they're right for doing it. I'm not saying they're wrong for doing it. My job is just to cover it. They're
Right.
doing it. This is why they say they're doing it. Republicans are coming up with this other thing, which is not completely grounded in fact, but it has this little nugget, and I'm here to explain what the nugget is, but it's also not really. And also, I mean, the Democratic bill is more than just the Obamacare subsidies. The Democratic bill, as you note, is about restoring funding to all sorts of Medicaid
Hmm.
services. But I assume that that is the Democrats' negotiating starting point, so that they can like agree to just do the Obamacare subsidies and everything else expires and whatever. But we'll see if the Republicans ever feel like they have to negotiate at all with
Well,
Democrats.
that's the issue ultimately for Democrats is whether they believe there will be a legit, earnest negotiation on all this stuff.
I think one of the other things that Democrats have learned is that when a party is the party that forces the shutdown, meaning you're the minority party and you're not providing whatever extra votes are needed to get to 60 in the Senate. In this case, it's the Democrats. In all previous cases that I can think of, it was the Republicans, I think. Maybe I'm wrong. But in any case, um, there really is actually no long-term price to pay. At least there hasn't been.
Hmm.
Like it just hasn't. People say, "Oh, the Republicans are going to pay a price for this next year at the midterms." No, that never happened. So I think Democrats, having seen that happen with the Republicans, are probably like, "We're not going to. We're not. There's really actually no long-term political price, and everybody, when the government reopens, everybody gets back pay. So it's not like they never get that money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." Again, I'm not. I'm agnostic
No.
here.
But it's like any other dysfunction that we experienced over the last several years. People become numb to it, and
It's crazy
it's
though.
not a
It
big, it's
really.
not a government shutdown. I mean,
So
I'm not that old where I can't remember when a government shutdown was a big deal, a feared thing, and today
in
it's like
2000
whatever.
in 2000 oh boy, it was during the first Obama, no, it was during the second Obama term, and there was a shutdown, and it
13 maybe.
was 2013, 2014, somewhere in there.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think it was the Ted Cruz one. He was
Hmm.
pushing Republicans to demand that Obamacare be repealed. I mean, it was never going to happen, right? It was just
Hmm.
never going to happen. But and it was such a big deal that at the time that we had hour-long specials at 11 o'clock called Shutdown Showdown. It was me and Dana Bash. I think Jessica Yellen might have been part. Like that's how big a deal it
Hmm.
was. Shutdown Showdown. I remember one night, uh, and we would get the senators. They would pop in after dinner, so they'd be a little wind up. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
WINED, wind up, and uh, yeah. Anyway, I remember a couple of little drunky poo senators coming on set because they'd had a little too much Merlot with their steak.
Well, what's interesting is that all the polls across the board are showing that Americans are blaming Republicans, and three-quarters of Americans want ACA subsidies to be extended. So it seems that Democrats are winning the messaging war, are they not?
Right now, a plurality. It's not a clear, decisive victory, but right now, uh, a plurality, according to a Washington Post poll that I think you're referring to.
Well, there's
Under
Maris,
Yeah,
there's
it,
New York
but
Times.
more people blame the Republicans and Trump than blame the Democrats. What I
Yep.
saw was like 45% Republicans, 30% Democrats, something like that.
47, I think it was. Yeah.
Okay, and like 20 something both, and like another 20
Right.
don't know. So
Yeah. Well, you're right. We don't know where it's going to go. It'll be interesting, but it is kind of shocking just to
I
see
just think
how
it's early. That's all.
it's, yeah. Well,
And we're,
okay.
then we start to see like we have not gotten the stories of
Hmm.
the soldiers' wives who can't afford braces for Timmy because they
That's
haven't
right.
been, like that. I just know as a journalist, those are coming probably in a couple weeks. I mean, like,
Yep.
this, how this actually affects people, or the TSA people who are working without pay, or, I mean, it's just it. And the thing that is the most annoying about this to me is, and I know that this will never happen, but were it up to me, were I king, then members of Congress would be the ones not paid. Members of the House and Senate would be the ones not paid, and
Right.
everybody else would be paid.
Hmm.
That's what I mean. The notion that we're not paying our military is
Yep.
so offensive, and the fact that these senators who, like, a starting Senate salary for a senator is $174,000 a year. That's, compared to the average American, that's nice. That's a good salary.
Yep. All right, let's get to your book.
Yes.
It's called Race Against Terror: Chasing an Al Qaeda Killer at the Dawn of the Forever War.
So it's a nonfiction book.
Well, it's out
Uh,
tomorrow. Let's get that out there.
comes out
Tomorrow,
tomorrow.
October 7th. But you were telling me something before we got on that there's a prosecutor who was let
Yeah.
go and that.
Michael Ben Ari. Michael
Hmm.
Ben Ari. So the guy in my book is a Al-Qaeda terrorist from Saudi Arabia named Spin Ghoul, and I'll get to
Hmm.
his story in a second
Hmm.
because it's really interesting, and it's a book about sleuthing that I think your listeners and viewers will like. But beyond that, what you need to know is it is the story of the prosecution, the first ever prosecution of a foreign terrorist in a U.S. criminal court for killing service members in a battlefield. It had never happened before. It was like very controversial, 2011, 2012, 2013, and we'll get into that in a second. But what I want you to know is, what I want your listeners and viewers to know is that President Trump, perhaps unknowingly, is following in Obama's footsteps, and that he has brought forward the second foreign terrorist to be tried in a criminal court for killing American service members abroad. And that is this guy named Jafar. And you might remember during President Trump's joint address to Congress, he announced that one of the Abbey Gate killers was on his way to Virginia. And he is. He's in a jail in Virginia. But what happened last week is really important, and not a lot of people know about it. Is this guy, Michael Ben Ari, who was the assistant U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, where there's already been a lot of tumult because the former acting U.S. attorney was fired for not bringing charges against James Comey, the FBI director. And now this guy was fired for just some completely bonkers reasons. Some MAGA, whoever, just on Twitter just claimed that Michael Ben Ari was part of the pushback against the Comey prosecution, when our sources tell us that he had nothing to do with it and he was not involved at all. And he said, he wrote a letter, he put it on his door like Martin Luther, and he said, um, the decision to do this, hurts the case. And he said that leaders of the Justice Department, I'm paraphrasing, but I'm not by much, are making decisions that favor going after the president's perceived political enemies over providing for the national security of the American people, which is a very stark thing to say in this day and age when so many government officials, reporters, others are terrified of arousing the ire of the White House. So he said that. And it got me thinking, because a guy in my book, George Toscas, who I've never interviewed, never talked to, never emailed, never heard back from, I should say. I've reached out to him for my book. He would not cooperate. He's one of these classic Justice Department guys, prosecutors, wants nothing to do with the press. He just does his jobs. This guy was the hurdle that prosecutors had to make it through in order to get a case approved, to get an extradition, to get an indictment. You had to get it through George Toscas, because George Toscas had been there since 1993, and he was seasoned and tough. and again, this guy has never given me the time of day. Like I have no reason to say this other than it's just true, and this is what all these colleagues said. George Toscas in January of this year was sidelined from the National Security Division of the Justice Department because he had signed off on the warrant for Trump at Mar-a-Lago when he was keeping all those classified documents and not returning them. And these decisions, whether it's Eric Siebert, the acting U.S. attorney in Virginia, who was fired for not going through with the Comey prosecution, or George Toscas, or Michael Ben-Ari, these decisions are making us less safe. And I feel like I can say that because I've written this book about the first such case of a foreign terrorist being tried to criminal court for killing Americans abroad, service members abroad in a war zone. And like it was so difficult to do this case and to get it over the hurdles. And the sleuthing was unbelievable. And they did all this because they knew that the case had to be airtight. And they didn't want to take any risks in this guy escaping or escaping justice, I should say. And it was a very real threat. And the fact that these petty, I don't even know if Trump knows about these decisions, most of them, but they are being done in his name. And they are, according to people I, rely on for information, straight shooters, not partisan, just about keeping Americans safe. These decisions are making us less safe. You can't remove expertise in prosecuting terrorists and think it's not going to have an impact.
Well, it reminds me when you say, did Trump know or does he know? It reminds us all of like what Michael Cohen used to say about how Donald Trump would give his
Right.
Godfather-like orders. He wouldn't specifically say something, but he'd say, you know what I mean? And then everybody would go off and interpret what he means and go do it. So
Yeah,
whether or
Henry
not,
II. It's a Henry II. Will nobody rid me of this turbulent priest? And then all of
yeah,
a sudden the Archbishop of Canterbury gets assassinated. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to have the direct order.
right. Not with this guy for sure. So tell us about Spin Ghoul. By the way, this is a really great read. It's such a riveting, true story. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Tell us about Spin and why you decided to write about this particular story at this particular time.
So I wrote about it just because I had heard the story and it was just so fascinating to me. And I'm the kind of guy, I love a good police procedural. I love CSI. I love Cold Case. I love Law and Order. I love all those shows. I love the sleuthing. And I heard the story kind of just randomly. It was my son's, it was basically 3 years ago this month, and it was my son's birthday party. It was a paintball party out in the middle of nowhere, Virginia. And because it was so far, I had pizza and drinks for the grown-ups so they could just like hang out for an hour and a half while the kids, killed each other in the woods. And one of the dads came up to me and said, "Oh, I know so and so from your last book, The Outpost, which was about Afghanistan." And I said, "Oh yeah, that book was really tough to write because the military keeps such shitty records and they don't share them with anybody." And he said, "Tell me about it." And then he tells me this story. He's an assistant U.S. attorney in Brooklyn. He gets a call one day from the FBI. The Italians have picked up this guy who claims he's Al-Qaeda on a cruise ship during the Arab Spring. Berlusconi, the prime minister of Italy, has commandeered all these cruise ships to bring all these thousands of refugees from Tunisia and Libya from the southern Italian islands to the mainland. And this guy, Spin Ghoul, he asks for water. An Italian guard says, "Where do you have?" He has a bullet scar. "Where'd you get that?" "Oh, I got it fighting Americans in Afghanistan. I'm with Al-Qaeda. I don't belong with these refugees. I'm Al-Qaeda." Demands like a certain amount of respect. The Italians take him into custody. He confesses to everything. He tells them his life story. He's so proud of his life story. He's a little touched in the head because he's just been in a Libyan prison for 5 years. And he tells his whole story, and the Americans hear it in an Italian court. They can't believe it. It's just like they've heard of him. He's like a upper mid-level Al-Qaeda operative. And he tells a story about ambushing Americans, killing Americans in Afghanistan, going to Nigeria, trying to blow up the U.S. embassy there. And the Italians are like, "Great, take him." And the Americans can't just take him because any first-year law student could get that case thrown out. Like he's just some lunatic. You have no evidence that he actually did any of this. You don't even know what battle it was. So the Americans then have to do this sleuthing first, like very short term, good enough to build a case to get an indictment so the Italians don't free him. Because the Italians are like, we're just going to stick him in a refugee camp. And everybody knows that's not secure. He'll just walk out, and he wants to kill as many Americans as possible. They have to act, or else this guy is going to kill Americans. So they have to prove this case. And the sleuthing of it is what the book's about. It's just like how they built this case because that stuff was so interesting and it wasn't in any of the coverage of the prosecution of him. And so that's the story of Spingool, and we get into like who the Americans were that he ambushed and how the prosecutors and the FBI agents proved the case against him. And I just thought it was a great yarn. So when David Bitcower, this dad of my son's friend Max, told me the story, I was like, has anybody written this story before? Like, it's incredible. And he said, no, there was some, newspaper coverage when he was tried, but nothing about how we built the case. And so it was just so interesting to me. I just wanted to know more. And the more I learned, the more I was convinced this would be a good book.
And it wasn't easy for Bitcower and the other prosecutor, Shreve Ariel, to get Spin to the U.S. to stand trial. Can you talk about some of the notable challenges they faced, in particular with the Italian government?
Well, okay, so first of all, the Italians at this point, 2011, 2012, are furious at the United States, as is much of Europe, for the global war on terror and the way the Bush administration had waged it with enhanced interrogation and extraordinary rendition and Gitmo. And the Italians will not turn him over if he's going to Gitmo. The Italians will not turn him over if he's going to a military tribunal. The Italians will not turn him over if he's going to be subject to the death penalty. So they're setting their own rules there. And the Italians at this point are so furious with the United States. There has just been a major case where they prosecuted in absentia a number of CIA operatives and U.S. military officers for kidnapping, in their view, for kidnapping an Egyptian cleric and and whisking him out of the country, what the U.S. at the time called extraordinary rendition. A guy who's now free, in I think back in Egypt. But in any case, the Italians, they didn't, so they were not fans of ours, and they don't look at, we don't look at the French government or the French people differently depending on whether it's Macron or Mitterrand that is the head of the French government, right? We just always kind of think of them as, yeah, like the politicians are different, but it's all France. Well, that's how they look at us. Nobody says, oh, you're Obama now, you're good. Nobody in Europe was saying that. It's just like, this is, you're still doing shady stuff. Gitmo's still open, etc. So that's one. And then two is just the challenge of finding evidence. I mean, like they're talking about proving something that happened on a battlefield in 2003. They figure out which ambush it was, but I mean, it's not like they can go there and there's like a police tape surrounding, they have to like okay, so what evidence do we have from that battle? What exists? Who was there? Again, the Pentagon's not there with a handing over a list like here's who was there that day. I mean, like they have to recreate it and figure it all out for themselves. Same way I do when I write my books. And then also there's the political dimension of this, which is that not just Republicans, Democrats are very opposed. I mean, politicians, not voters, but also voters, very opposed to the notion of bringing a foreign terrorist from abroad to the United States. There is this fear. People are still terrorized by 9/11, and people are unreasonably scared of the idea of an American terrorist in a Brooklyn jail or a Manhattan jail or a Virginia jail because I don't know, I guess there's this fear that like they'll escape and they have like Thanos like powers and they'll kill us all and look, the idea of Spingool walking free is a very terrifying thought, but that wasn't, bringing him to the United States wasn't going to do that. The question is,
Right.
where was, what was going to, like the rational conversation is if the Italians keep him, they're going to let him go. We have to do something, and the only way to do something is to bring him to the United States. But there was a lot of resistance, and in fact, Congress passed a law saying in order to do that, there had to be President Obama had to sign a special waiver just for Spingool, which happened.
Yeah. And Obama himself insisted that this case be done strictly by the book, right?
Yeah. Well, there was when he came in, he had a lot of plans and thoughts about how the war on terror should be waged differently than the way it had been waged during the Bush years. Some of that didn't happen. Like Gitmo's still open today with a handful of terrorists still there. But he did stop CIA black sites as far as I know. He stopped extraordinary rendition, and he wanted to try everybody in a criminal court, but he came head to head with reality on that too, in that His plans to try the 9/11 mastermind, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and others in a criminal court in Manhattan never happened because there was so much resistance by Democrats and Republicans in Congress, Chuck Schumer too. And at the end of the day, like this was a very remarkable and unique case. There was so much effort that went into it to prove that this Al Qaeda operative had killed Americans, and he was given the best defense that any American would be entitled to, and tried in Brooklyn, and and prosecuted. And it was just such a fascinating case.
And were there things that in researching and writing the book that you uncovered and you were like, holy shit, that you were so surprised to learn?
I'm always just one of the great honors and joys of covering a story like this is just learning about regular Americans, whether it's people who were related to the service members who were killed or wounded, or just the rank and file FBI agents, rank and file prosecutors who are just doing their job. The story is actually like at a time that there's so much confidence being lost in our government and the function of our government, our Justice Department, the FBI. The story is really a book about like how a functioning government can work. It's very successful what they do. But the stuff that surprised me would just be the individual stories
Hmm.
of these either the service members or there was this incredible story. So one of the two guys that Spingool killed, or his ambush killed, was a guy named Jared Dennis, who was a Native American kid from Oklahoma, a town called Antlers, Oklahoma. And Jared Dennis's brother Renly, he followed the prosecution of Spingool very closely, obviously. He and his mom and his sister, and his dad went to the trial and all that. And when it came time for sentencing, um, there's a thing called victim impact statements, where
Hmm.
before the judge decides to sentence, the victims of the defendant can speak. And Renly decided to speak on behalf of Jared Dennis's family. He had read a book that I'd never heard of called "You Cannot Have My Hate." "You Cannot Have
Hmm.
My Hate" was written by a French man whose wife and the mother of their kid was killed in the Bataclan terrorist attack by ISIS. You might remember when an American band was performing in Paris, and ISIS, like four or five
Hmm.
ISIS operatives. It was a
Hmm.
bloodbath. Anyway, this guy went on Facebook. This French guy went on Facebook and wrote this essay called "You Cannot Have My Hate," and it was basically just saying to the ISIS operatives, like, I'm not going to spend my life thinking about you and hating you and loathing you. I'm not going to give you that. And it was such a viral sensation, it became a book. And then Renly Dennis was in the Barnes and Noble in Antlers, Oklahoma, and saw it. And he was very inspired during sentencing to talk about how Spingool will not have his hate.
Hmm.
And those are the kinds of stories that I always just get floored by, because it's just a regular American just living his life in Antlers, Oklahoma, and just coming up with profound emotional takes on one of the worst things that can happen to you. Your brother is killed by a terrorist.
Yeah, and
Um,
the judge in that case said that was like the most incredible family.
he'd
Uh,
never heard anything like it.
yeah,
He had to take a moment in chambers because it was
yeah.
so emotional to him. And the Judge Kogan, really interesting character himself, who, like, he kind of thought the whole case was the Obama administration just being performative and showing off, like, this is what an American jurisprudence should look like, kind of thing. And he didn't understand why they went through all the trouble. Like, in his view, it was just like, yeah, why don't you just lock him up? You're the president, you can do whatever you want. But in any case, it was just the individual reactions from individual soldiers and family members, and just the American mosaic of who these men and women were, who were part of the system, the three attorneys who were Spingool's defense attorneys doing everything they could to defend him, all three of them Jewish New Yorkers, with a guy who would kill them as soon as look at them. The rank and file FBI agents, two of them are Muslim women, working hard to, put away people who corrupt their religion, whether ISIS or Al Qaeda. And then just, it's honestly, it's just a pleasure to like meet these people and tell their stories the best way you can.
Yeah, I mean, for me, one of the more surprising things in the book, along the lines of what you're saying, is the deep emotional attachment that some of the veterans have to the souvenirs they take
Yeah,
back. In one case with the Quran that he had
yeah.
taken back, and which was needed for evidence, and how he just don't want to let go of that. And I never thought of that. You think like guys go to war, and they just want to get the hell out, and here they are coming back with stuff that in a perhaps way we can't understand reminds them of the horror they face there.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was very fortunate that all the soldiers cooperated pretty much, with the except there were one I couldn't track down who just he seems to have just he's off the grid, and another one who is in such rough shape from that battle. Like there was even a debate in the book about whether or not they should call him as a witness, which they did not. But mo almost all of them cooperated with the book, and some of the stories they told were just incredible. And yeah, you don't like I never really it never really occurred to me the souvenirs how the emotional impact they might have. But as you note, like when they're trying to build the case against Spin Ghoul, one of the things they're looking for is any physical evidence from the site of the battle in 2003 that might have his fingerprints or might have belonged to Spin Ghoul. And so they're calling every soldier. And again, the Pentagon's not helping them with this. Like
Right.
they're doing it the same way I do it. You call a soldier and who else do you know? And you get the names and numbers of others. And they're looking for stuff from the battlefield. And there's a giant knife and a notebook and prayer beads and a Quran and they're just trying to track down everything. It's unclear where all this stuff actually physically lives, but they're trying to build a criminal case. And yeah, they track down this one guy. I think it's Dwayne McKnight out in California, and uh, he's like, they said, "Do you have this? Do you have these items?" And he says, "Yeah." And they said, "We need them." And you can't have them.
Right.
It's like, fuck you. Yeah, I'm not going to give them to you. And this is a guy who's like, he had souvenirs from like his ancestors from World War II, and one of his cousins, I think, had a Japanese Harry Carry knife, just all sorts of stuff from, generations that went to war. And he thought like, well, I want my grandkids to have this stuff and like know that I was part of this war. And but when you're talking to an FBI agent, they're like, we need those. We'll give them back, I promise, but we need those. And it's not in the book, but they were good to their word. The Dwayne McKnight got the items back after the case was over.
Race Against Terror. It's out tomorrow. Congrats. Good luck with it. And thanks for coming on and talking about it.
Always a pleasure. Thanks so much, Andy. Continued success to you.
All righty. Take care. This episode was produced and edited by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-produced by Matty Rosenberg and Jen Hammoud for Radio Free Rhinecliff, with additional editing by Matty Rosenberg, music by Andrew Hollander, and graphic design by Cricket Langell. And with a special thanks to our sponsor, The Epicurean. Again, thanks for listening. Please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to the Backroom with Andy Ostroy YouTube channel, where you can watch full videos of our interviews. See you next time.